This is the face of a mass shooter, David Katz, showing no emotion as he plays in a Madden tournament against other pro gamers. Katz was an elite player known as Bread, who always had the same lifeless expression on his face whether he won or lost a game. During a professional Madden 19 tournament in Jacksonville, Florida, Katz refused to shake the hand of his opponent after losing to him and stormed out of the tournament. Shortly afterwards, he returned with 2 handguns and fired 12 rounds into the players and crowd. 2 people were killed and 10 others were wounded before Katz turned the gun on himself. This eerie photo shows the red dot from David's sight on the chest of 22-year-old victim Elijah Clayton, who made a last-minute decision to enter the tournament. It was later revealed that Katz had suffered from numerous mental illnesses and had been institutionalized several times throughout his life. EA Sports offered its most heartfelt sympathies and donated $1 million to the victims' families in lieu of the senseless tragedy. In the wake of his recent arrest, let's take a look at some morbid facts that you didn't know about P. Diddy. Diddy's father, Melvin Combs, was an associate of convicted New York drug lord Frank Lucas. When Diddy was just 2 years old, his father was gunned down in a related gang attack. In 1991, P. Diddy organized an AIDS fundraiser after a charity basketball game. The event was oversold and a stampede occurred that resulted in the deaths of 9 people. He was quickly criticized by the mayor for letting inexperienced people plan the event and selling way too many tickets. A former FBI agent has claimed that Tupac's former boss Suge Knight financed the murder of Biggie Smalls in 1997, but the intended target was actually Biggie's boss P. Diddy, who was in the car in front of Biggie at the time. According to her lawsuit filed last year, when Cassie Ventura hit a rough patch in her relationship with Diddy in 2012, she briefly dated Kid Cudi. Combs was apparently so angry at this that he mentioned he wanted to blow up the rapper's car. The lawsuit reads, around that time, Kid Cudi's car exploded in his drive. Morbid Facts, Part 8. A grieving mother from Florida added a sandbox to the gravesite of her baby boy so that her older son could play with him. Forced standing was a barbaric form of treatment that was believed to be a cure for insanity in the 19th century. The mental patient would be forced to stand in a compact cell for days at a time with very limited food, water, and outside contact. This is a real photo of a patient enduring this treatment at a Texas mental institution in 1890. In 1977, the University of Evansville men's basketball team was involved in a tragic plane crash. The crash killed every player on the team, except for one man who didn't make the trip due to an injury. 2 weeks later, the only remaining player was killed by a drunk driver. In case you haven't been following along, here's what we know so far about the disturbing case against P. Diddy. Sean P. Diddy Combs was handed some rather damning charges that accused the rapper of running a decades-long operation which included sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, and bribery. The charges were centered around the parties that Diddy would throw called freak-offs, in which he and others would allegedly intimidate victims into performing sick, non-consensual acts on each other. During these parties, Combs allegedly hit, kicked, threw objects at, and dragged victims, sometimes by their hair, which often resulted in injuries that took days or weeks to heal. The rapper allegedly gave his victims a collection of drugs, in part to keep them compliant and obedient. He also utilized the sensitive, embarrassing, and incriminating recordings that he made during these freak-offs as collateral to ensure the continued silence of the victims. These freak-offs allegedly occurred regularly for decades, sometimes lasted multiple days, and often involved commercial prostitutes. When Diddy's homes were raided by federal agents last spring, they seized various freak-off supplies, including narcotics, illegal weapons, and more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lube. Diddy's attorneys requested that he be released on a $50 million bond, which was denied after prosecutors warned that Diddy was a serial abuser who still posed a serious flight risk and might intimidate victims if released. Combs pleaded not guilty, but if convicted on all charges, he may be facing a life sentence in prison. Morbid Facts, Part 436. In 2009, 25-year-old chemistry student Vladimir Likonos died after his chewing gum exploded in his mouth. He had a strange habit of dipping his gum in citric acid for extra sourness, but accidentally used an explosive powder from his chemistry experiments that was 4 times stronger than TNT. Likely caused by the reaction with his saliva or chewing pressure, the explosion blew off his jaw and led to his eventual death. According to a 2011 study, children exposed to family violence show the same patterns of brain activity as soldiers exposed to combat. Throughout Chinese history, it was common for parents to castrate their boys as a way to escape poverty. Both the shaft and the nuts would be sliced off with a knife at the same time. These castrated members of society, known as eunuchs, were considered thoroughly pure and therefore qualified as high-ranking civil servants. This disturbing system lasted until 1924, with the last imperial eunuch dying in 1996. Morbid Facts, Part 437. In 1989, Canadian hockey player Duncan McPherson completely vanished at an Austrian ski resort. 14 years later, in 2003, his mangled body and snowboard were found in the ice on the mountain, showing severe injuries consistent with machinery impact. Investigators concluded that he was accidentally run over by a snowcat and buried in a small gap, where his body remained hidden for more than a decade until the glacier started to melt. Mississippi man Jimmy Lee Gray was sentenced to death by gas chamber after kidnapping, sexually assaulting, and murdering a 3-year-old girl. When the gas was released, Lee began bashing his head against a metal pole behind the chair. The toxic fumes had failed to kill him quickly, leaving him gasping in agony for nearly 10 minutes. In 2021, zipline instructor Joaquin Romero tragically fell to his death after sacrificing himself for a customer. Realizing the zipline couldn't support both of their weights, he released himself to save the client. Morbid Facts, Part 4. In 1985, a 13-year-old Colombian girl was trapped up to her waist in volcanic mud flow. She was mostly alert and was interviewed, but rescuers couldn't find a way to save her. Knowing she would certainly die, volunteers did their best to comfort her. She died after 60 hours, and her image became iconic. In 2008, a Brazilian priest strapped 1,000 balloons onto a lawn chair and rode it into the sky as part of a fundraiser. He was able to reach an altitude of 20,000 feet before losing contact with authorities. Over a month later, the lower half of his body was found floating near an oil rig. Morbid Facts, Part 438. Within seconds of the band Great White taking the stage at the Station nightclub in 2003, faulty pyrotechnics ignited the flammable acoustic foam that surrounded the stage. Far exceeding the building's capacity, all 462 people quickly flooded the exits as the entire building was rapidly engulfed in flames. But many struggled to find the exits due to the heavy smoke, leading to a pileup at the front entrance that prevented anyone else from escaping. Multiple survivors also claimed that 2 bouncers blocked the stage door as fans attempted to escape the building, telling them that the door was only to be used by the band. In the end, 100 people lost their lives, including Great White's guitarist Ty Longley. One man named Mike Vargas managed to survive for 90 minutes inside the building. He was trampled by a mob trying to escape and only survived because he was insulated by all the bodies burning around him. He walked out with only minor burns but still suffers from severe PTSD.
Are you a cannibal? No. You know what you have to do to be a cannibal? You have to have actually eaten someone.
Have you ever eaten any human flesh?
No.
Morbid Facts, Part 439. The career of actor Armie Hammer quickly fell off in 2021 when several women accused him of being an abusive partner and aspiring cannibal. For example, his ex-girlfriend Courtney Vucekovich says their relationship was like dating Hannibal Lecter. She claims he genuinely tried convincing her to remove one of her ribs so that he could barbecue and eat it. In a collection of alleged messages, Armie claimed that he wanted to cut her skin and drink her blood, but that he would stitch her up again so as not to waste a perfect slave. He also wrote about wanting to pounce on her and grape her at knife point while she cried, and wanting to cut off one of her toes to keep a piece of her with him at all times. In response to these disturbing allegations, Armie was quoted saying, "I don't think that's any different than when someone looks at a baby and goes, 'Oh my God, look at those fat little legs. I just want to eat you up.'" Diddy's former dancer Adria English has spilled some serious tea about the notorious rapper, and the details are beyond disturbing. English was a go-go dancer for Diddy and was stationed at certain checkpoints at his freak-off parties. She claims she was used by Diddy to help set people up for blackmail. Here are her most disturbing claims from a recent interview, which get worse as the list goes on. And to be very clear, these are all just allegations that haven't yet been confirmed. Diddy refused to let a young dancer use the bathroom during one of his parties, so she just went number 2 on stage. Guest Denzel Washington watched this happen and stormed out of the party in pure disgust. Diddy once had a threesome with rapper Nelly and an unnamed underage girl. In the leaked photos of Diddy eating fruit off of a woman, she was actually 14 years old. An underage girl Diddy sexually abused had 2 of his children, and he helped deliver the babies at his own residence. At one party, Diddy made J-Lo stick a bottle in the private area of an 11-year-old girl. Diddy's 2 sons, Justin and Christian Combs, ran a train on Justin Bieber while he was tied down and sobbing. A young girl who witnessed this happening is part of the lawsuit against Diddy. The rapper apparently slapped her when she tried to loosen the straps on Bieber. And lastly, English herself says she was on one of the Diddy tapes as an underage girl being sexually abused by a former president. English has hinted that she'll be one of the witnesses to testify against Diddy in his upcoming trial. Morbid Facts, Part 440. 5 days before her wedding in September of 2009, Yale medical student Annie Lee suddenly went missing in the basement of a Yale laboratory. On the actual day she was supposed to get married, her body was found hanging upside down inside a wall cavity in the building. Her murderer, a lab technician who worked in the building, was eventually caught and sentenced to 44 years in prison. After his phone was stolen in 2020, 16-year-old Kevin Bui set a Denver house on fire that he mistakenly thought was the thief's home. The blaze tragically killed 5 members of an innocent family, including 2 young kids. Bui was tried as an adult and sentenced to 60 years in prison. After suffering a stroke in 2010, UK woman Sarah Colwell started speaking with a Chinese accent despite never even visiting China. No matter how hard she tries, Sarah can't return to her normal voice. She became one of less than 100 people to ever be diagnosed with foreign accent syndrome, a rare neurological condition caused by damage to the speech part of the brain. Morbid Facts, Part 441. While working in his garage in 2012, Chicago man Dante Autolo accidentally shot a 3-inch nail directly into his skull. But he had no idea the nail had entered his brain until he started feeling nauseous 36 hours later, and a dozen doctors were completely stunned when they saw his x-rays. The nail was surgically removed and Dante miraculously made a full recovery. After his meth-addicted wife spread a false rumor that he was a pedophile, Australian father Bradley Lyons was kidnapped and attacked by a vigilante group of pedophile hunters. He was tortured with lighters and knuckle dusters and threatened with a shotgun in his mouth for not confessing to his crimes. At some point, the group poured hot water over Bradley's head and cut off his hand with a chainsaw since he continued to deny the false allegations. They then left him in the trunk of a hot car for 21 hours before executing him in the woods. Several people were sentenced to years in prison for the horrific murder, including Bradley's wife. Morbid Facts, Part 418. In 2004, a deranged fan rushed the stage during the first song at a Pantera concert and fatally shot legendary guitarist Dimebag Darrell multiple times with a pistol. He then killed 3 others attempting to subdue him while injuring 3 more before being shot in the head by an officer. The killer's motive remains unclear to this day. During a live firing demonstration in 1942, a Royal Air Force pilot accidentally opened fire on a crowd of spectators. 25 British soldiers were killed while another 71 were wounded after being mistaken for dummies. After his floppy trouser snake was torn off in a car accident when he was 6 years old, 43-year-old Mohammed Abad received a fully functional bionic 8-inch pecker. It was constructed over a 3-year period using skin grafts and is complete with a mechanical interior and a fluid pouch to give him erections at the press of a button. According to the surgeons involved, its function is still complete enough for Abad to be able to father a child with his still intact right nut. Morbid Facts, Part 419. This video shows Florida mother Brianna Williams puking after hearing the news that the body of her missing 5-year-old daughter Taylor had been discovered. Williams first reported Taylor missing in April of 2019, 7 months before her body was found. But in reality, Brianna had horribly neglected her daughter until she tragically ended up starving to death. Brianna secretly placed Taylor's body in the back of her car, wrapped her in a garbage bag, and buried her in a shallow grave. Williams pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison. Often called the world's youngest political prisoner, in 1995, Gendun Chukinima was chosen at the age of 6 as the next Panchen Lama, the second highest authority of Tibetan Buddhism and the selector of the next Dalai Lama. But 3 days after being chosen, the boy and his family were kidnapped by the Chinese government and haven't been seen nor heard from in nearly 30 years since. Morbid Facts, Part 420. In 2009, Florida woman Carol Bryan received facial fillers that were mistakenly injected into the wrong spot, causing her forehead to swell up so severely that she went blind in one eye. Carol went from a fashion model to a recluse, refusing to leave her home for years due to the monstrous appearance of her face. Medical students in the UK were recently left astonished after the autopsy of a 78-year-old man. He unknowingly lived his whole life with 3 dicks, an extremely rare condition known as supernumerary penile formation. Polish adventurer Alexander Doba kayaked solo across the Atlantic 3 times, once at the age of 70. 4 years later, he reached the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro, sat down for a break, fell asleep, and never woke up. In 2009, 2 women bet 28-year-old Russian man Sergei Tuganov $4,300 that he couldn't last 12 hours in bed with them. He won the bet, but later suffered a fatal heart attack after consuming an entire bottle of Viagra. Morbid Facts, Part 421. Christine Palillo was a bullied outcast at school until 2 popular girls befriended her and gave her a makeover, helping her achieve the title of Miss Irresistible from her school's student body. But just a few months later, Christine and her drug addict boyfriend would end up brutally murdering the girls and 2 others in a botched drug deal. One of the girls tried desperately crawling to her phone after being shot in the groin, until Christine bashed her skull in with the butt of her revolver. Serial killer Dennis Rader used to install security systems for homeowners. Many of his clients wanted the security systems to keep the BTK killer from ever entering their homes, unaware that he was in fact the one installing them. In 2017, Glenna Durham killed her husband after shooting him 5 times. Soon afterwards, the couple's pet African gray parrot started repeating the words "don't effing shoot" in the husband's voice. These were assumed to be the husband's last words, and the woman was eventually found guilty of first-degree murder. Morbid Facts, Part 422. In 1986, 21-year-old Christopher Thomas Knight ran out of gas in rural Maine, entered the woods, and lived there for the next 27 years without human contact. He survived by committing over 1,000 burglaries against houses in the area to be able to endure the harsh winters of Maine. Knight was eventually captured by a game warden and sentenced to 7 months in jail, later vowing to live normally and to never steal again. Morbid Facts, Part 692. In 2022, Twitch streamer and former adult star Adriana Chechik broke her back after jumping into a deceptively shallow foam pit at TwitchCon. The pit was barely padded over concrete and she fractured her spine in multiple places. While hospitalized, she discovered that she was pregnant, but the emergency surgery forced her to terminate the pregnancy. Metal rods were implanted as she had to relearn how to walk and was left with lasting nerve damage. The incident sparked outrage as others were also injured, but no real accountability followed. Chechik later said the experience destroyed a part of her life that she'll never get back. In 1996, Polish model and former Miss International Agnieszka Kotlarska narrowly escaped death when she canceled her seat at the last minute on TWA Flight 800, the doomed flight that exploded mid-air, killing all 230 people on board. But just weeks later, fate caught up with her. As she arrived home, a stalker she once knew attacked without warning, stabbing her to death in front of her husband and young daughter. To prove that mosquitoes transmitted yellow fever, American physician Jesse William Lazier deliberately allowed himself to be bitten by an infected mosquito. 17 days later, Lazier died from the very disease he was trying to study. His death confirmed the deadly role of mosquitoes in spreading yellow fever, sacrificing his life to save millions of others. In the 19th century, African woman Sarah Bartman was displayed as a freak show attraction in Europe for her unusually large backside. Marketed as the missing link between man and beast, she was often brought out as an exhibit at wealthy parties and private events. In 1815, Sarah died of an unknown illness at the age of 26, likely as a result of her poor living conditions. Her remains were later displayed in the French Museum of Natural History for over a century, before she was finally laid to rest in her native South Africa in 2002. Morbid Facts, Part 423. Pat Morita, the actor who played Mr. Miyagi, spent the first 9 years of his life in a hospital due to tuberculosis. After undergoing extensive surgery and finally learning how to walk, he was sent to a Japanese internment camp in Arizona. During the 4th century BC in Nordlingen, Germany, this 9-year-old boy became severely disabled following a leg infection, was killed by a blow to the head, then thrown into a grain silo that was reused as a garbage pit. A Queen's Guard horse named Obelisk used to lure in pigeons by dropping oats from his mouth. When they got close enough to him, he would brutally stomp them to death. Obelisk was eventually sent away for additional psychological training. Considered one of the greatest strength athletes of all time, Icelandic powerlifter John Paul Sigmarsson once famously said, "There's no reason to be alive if you can't do deadlift." A few years later, at the young age of 32, he died of an aortic rupture while deadlifting in his gym. Morbid Facts, Part 424. Known for his historically cruel behavior, Roman Emperor Nero accidentally killed his pregnant wife by kicking her to death. He then found a young boy named Sporus who looked exactly like her, castrated him, then married him. Nero would call the boy by his deceased wife's name and dress him in women's clothing, while making his court play along with this disturbing act. The unsettling relationship would come to an end when Nero died in 68 AD, but this was only the beginning of the boy's suffering. For the next 3 Roman emperors, Sporus would serve as a royal sex slave. One of these horrible emperors, named Vitellius, planned on humiliating the boy in a public performance. In the middle of the gladiator games, Sporus would be graped in front of a stadium crowd as a reenactment of the Grape of Proserpina, after which he would be publicly executed. Upon hearing about this sinister plan, Sporus decided to end his own life at the young age of 19. Morbid Facts, Part 425. In 2021, Tessica Brown ran out of her regular hairspray, so she tried using Gorilla Glue spray instead. Her hair then became stuck to her scalp for more than a month, despite hundreds of attempts to wash it out. Brown says she felt so helpless that she stopped eating and lost more than 10 pounds over a short span. Eventually, a plastic surgeon performed a 4-hour-long surgery on her for free to remove the adhesive. Once described as a genius, Russian man Anatoly Moskvin was a well-respected linguist and historian until he was discovered to be living with the corpses of 26 girls in his parents' home. He apparently dug them up from local cemeteries before mummifying and dressing them like dolls. Anatoly's parents were well aware of the dolls but had no idea they contained real human corpses. After his arrest, Moskvin stated that he had great sympathy for the dead children and believed that one day they could be brought back to life through science or black magic. He's been forced to live in a mental hospital since 2012. Morbid Facts, Part 426. In 2011, 6-year-old Illinois boy Timothy Pitson was taken out of school by his mother to go on a trip. She then ended her life and left a note saying Timothy is safe at the hands of someone trustworthy and would never be found. The boy hasn't been seen since, as here's an updated age progression image of what he may look like now. The Vietnamese version of Cinderella is much darker than the family-friendly version we know and love. In the end, Cinderella boils her stepsister to death, turns what remains of her into a sauce, and sends it to her stepmother to eat. She enjoys the sauce so much that she eats it all until she finds the skull of her dead daughter and dies from shock. In 2015, a 46-year-old woman accidentally took 55 milligrams of pure LSD, equal to a staggering 550 times the typical dosage. She apparently blacked out for the first 12 hours and felt pleasantly high for the second 12. The next day, her lifelong foot pain had ceased, which helped her kick her morphine addiction. Morbid Facts, Part 427. In 1998, SNL star and renowned voice actor Phil Hartman was shockingly killed in his sleep by his wife Brynn. She then showed her friend the body, locked herself in a bathroom, and turned the gun on herself. Futurama's Philip J. Fry was named in honor of Phil Hartman, who was supposed to be the voice of Zapp Brannigan before he died. About 50% of panda births result in twins, but panda moms always focus on raising their strongest cub while letting the other ones starve to death. Therefore, zookeepers have to switch the cubs every few hours to trick the mom into caring for both. In 2019, a horrific bungee cord accident caused this Taiwanese man's iris to completely collapse. The father of physics, Max Planck, lived a life that was filled with tragedy. His wife died young, his oldest son died in World War I, his 2 twin daughters both died while giving birth, and his second son was executed by Nazi Germany because of a failed assassination attempt on Hitler.